Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. Each episode, we talk about a particular topic in the life of a professor. We are tenure-track faculty members in the sciences, working at a primarily undergraduate university in California. The purpose of our podcast is reflection, so we bring something we think is working and something we're working on to discuss.
Welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. Hi, I'm Ruth.
And I'm Claire. And today we're going to talk about SoTL, the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning. But first, Ruth, how was your week?
My week was pretty great, and a big factor in that was I love reading the newspaper, and I love reading a particular newspaper, which is the Irish Times from Ireland that I grew up reading. And my foster mom sent me an Irish Times. And I haven't read one.
Physical copy.
Yeah, and it was yesterday because we did the Tech Sabbath, and it was just like heaven. Like I just sat down and read the whole thing, and like they have a really great crossword in it.
Awesome.
There's a really hard crossword which I can't even begin to understand, and then there's a really simple crossword that I really like doing. But it's just so nice. It was so lovely, and even though obviously it's like 2 weeks old because that's how long it takes to get here, but. Yeah, it's really, and it's a really weird emigrant thing. Like anytime I've gone home, like I bring the paper from the day that I leave, and like I read it to death. Like literally every like classified everything, I read it, and it kind of makes me a little, like it makes me very nostalgic for Ireland for sure, but it also makes me a little nostalgic for not like self-selecting what I want to read, because I read like a whole bunch of articles that I wouldn't have clicked on necessarily, but just because they were right there in front of me and I was eating toast, I read them. So that was super lovely. So I think I'm gonna try and get some kind of network in Ireland where I can make people send me the paper all the time.
Nice.
That would be super cool. But how about you? How was your week?
It sounds so lovely to have that connection with home. And also, what's is there anything that stands out about the paper that you just really enjoy besides that home connection?
I think the home, I don't know. And I was actually thinking about it a lot yesterday, and I was like, why is this? Like, is it just nostalgia, or is it some way my brain is wired? Like, even just the turn of phrase people use, like everything. And Eric was saying, like, just the faces of all the journalists look so Irish, or just so familiar in some way. It's so weird. It's super, but it's just this like super intense. Like,
how nice.
So,
well, that sounds
that
lovely.
Was a really lovely treat yesterday. But so how about you?
My week was good. It was the last week with my summer research students. So we had our last meeting, and they're still working with me in the fall, but they've got their few weeks off. And I don't know, it was just really nice to like finish out that arc. We got to a spot. That's where we're at. They're completed their summer research experience, and so I don't know. It was just nice to reach that landmark of the finish line, you know?
Oh, totally. Because I actually finished with my guys on Thursday, cool. And I think there's some of them are writing up a report next week. But they got so much done. Like I haven't been like working this summer. Like I haven't been, paid to research. So I've kind of just been doing the meetings a little bit, but I really want to like sit down and just go through everything they did, because there's just this huge amount of stuff now.
Awesome.
It really is that thing of like dribs and drabs all semester, and then suddenly over the summer it's like a rocket ship. So
much more time over the summer for the students. Yeah.
And I think I need to do a little digesting of it for sure.
Totally. Yeah. So do you have a quote for us today?
I do. I feel like it's controversial because it's this like comfort movie I have, which I love and my husband loves, and it genuinely like part of it was like, you love this movie too? Great. Like we should totally get married. But it is The Day After Tomorrow. I feel like it's controversial because maybe scientifically it's not super accurate, but it's just so great. I love it.
Okay.
So it's
I don't think I know it.
Oh my God, it's so good. Dennis Quaid is one of my favorite actors too, so it's just got everything in it. Cool. But it's like there's this, whatever science justification they have, there's something about global warming that ends up leading to another ice age, and it's happening really suddenly, and like it kind of moves across like New York and everything is frozen and it's very dramatic. And this geologist is like hiking across the country to get his son who's trapped somewhere. And it's just great. But there's a
Okay,
character
awesome.
in it. Do you know the actor Ian Holm?
Mm-mm.
He
I
was
am not good with
Bilbo
these.
in Lord of the Rings.
Oh, okay. Yes, I do.
Yeah, sorry. That's like my thing. Oh,
Thanks for
him.
that.
But he plays a professor. So I have the professor
Okay,
bit. There's a
perfect.
called
Nice.
Terry Rapson, and he is on this like small island somewhere in England, and he's like some weather station, and he's been talking to the main American guy. Like they realize what's happening, and they're trying to convince people. And it's at the point where the ice storm is coming, and like whoever is going to get caught in it is going to die.
Oh,
And
wow.
so the guy, Dennis Quaid, is saying to him, okay, it's time for us to get you out of here. And here's my quote is from him. And he says, I'm afraid that time has come and gone, my friend. And he's sort of resigned to, he's not going to make it out of there. And it felt resonant for me this week because I am not prepared for the semester. And that delusion I had of having everything done, and I was like, oh, that time has come and gone where I could have gotten, like, you know, at the beginning of the summer, I had like this secret delusion I was nursing that I might even get the whole course prepped over the summer. And like right now, I'm like, oh, if I could just get the
I
syllabus
know.
done, it will be spectacular. So anyway,
I know.
that time has come and gone for me to have done that. So
That's a very
yeah,
timely quote. I like it.
yes, yes, yes. But yeah. So tell me, should we talk a little bit about what scholarship of teaching and learning is?
Yes, and I would love to hear your thoughts about it. I have to admit I didn't even know the acronym until you put it on our possible topics list. So
I didn't
totally.
know the acronym until last year when I did a class in what it was.
Oh, well,
And
perfect. So
so
yes, tell us
yeah.
what you told your class.
Oh
What is
wait, so
SoTL?
I went to a class about it where they
Oh,
told
okay.
me, yeah, I'm
Tell
not
us what you
qualified to be the
learned
one.
in the class.
So it's the scholarship of teaching and learning, and so what they kind of summarize it as is doing research on your class and like doing things like when I make this change to my class, what is the outcome, and like doing research studies but of your teaching. And so they heavily marketed it to us as it's so great if you teach at a 4-year university and you have this like insane teaching schedule. This would be a great way to like get some publications or to do some research. And also, especially maybe for science people, like if we're kind of motivated by data, like getting to see that and see the changes that get made when you make these changes could be kind of motivating.
Cool. So, do you think I like to think of it as like a field of research that is how to effectively teach and learn.
That is a better
Is that
definition.
accurate?
Yeah, I like it. That's more succinct. But yeah, I like it. Yeah.
So, do you think? See, I'm deferring to you on this episode. So
Oh, please.
this summer, so one of the things my students worked on was rethinking with me some of the homework that we were doing in the class and
Oh,
rewriting it. And
totally.
that is that within the category of SoTL?
Oh, absolutely. And I think this is something that I kind of want to talk about because I have a hard time distinguishing what qualifies sometimes,
Yes, me
you
too.
know, and yeah, but I totally think that would qualify for sure. And I think it's something I'm going to save some of this for what I'm working on.
Totally.
But yeah, I think that totally would qualify. And I have seen I sometimes so there is actually a whole field of physics education research.
Mm-hmm.
It's called PER, and that's like its whole thing. So it's sort of weird because I guess there's this overlap between the SoTL people, who is everybody, and then it seems like there is this very well defined PER community in physics. Is that true in chemistry?
Well, there's definitely Journal of Chemical Education.
Oh yeah,
And so, yeah, I think so. Mm-hmm.
yeah. And so I think the kind of range of different studies people can do is huge because it seems like you could totally do a case study where you just sort of describe a thing that you did, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and then other things are like, I made this change and then here's the data from 9,000 students and
Uh-huh.
it changed their GPA by this. And, you know, it's much more numerical. Is that
That's cool.
quantitative? Quantitative is the word I'm looking for. Yeah, so I don't know,
That's awesome.
those two.
So, yeah, when I was trying to summarize this, what I know about this. So it seems like the scholarship that other people have already done, we can access in journals, and that can be a resource for finding
Oh,
effective
yeah.
teaching methods. And then it can also be an outlet for us to do research on our own experiments that we're naturally doing in the class.
Absolutely.
Cool. Okay,
Yeah, and I
so yeah,
think
go ahead.
I certainly didn't realize the number of journals out there and the things that are out there that you can find out about. Like
Yeah,
as you're saying, it's a resource for like your teaching practice too.
yeah. I've only barely dipped my toe into it, but I'm surprised. It's awesome how much stuff is out there that's already been tested that you can use. So yeah,
Yeah. So do you want to say what's been working for you?
I would like you to go first. What do you have
Okay.
as what's
Yeah,
working for
no
you?
worries. Um, I think for me, what's working is, and I keep going back to this over and over again, but the American Association of Physics Teachers meeting, the
Uh huh.
AAPT, was just huge, and just my brain is still like bouncing around from all of the cool stuff that I heard, and hearing
Okay.
about that stuff is super cool. And so if somebody was interested in getting involved in it, that would be such a cool thing to go to do. Not necessarily the AAPT, but whatever your discipline is, and sort of branch, or a SoTL conference overall, and just kind of hearing about that
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And because my experience has been like, I can't do this, I don't know anything. And then after you go to these meetings, you're like, oh my God, there's like 5,000 ideas, and it's so exciting. And
Awesome.
so I think it's really cool to do a little bit of submersion into like that whole field and
Uh
hearing
huh.
about that stuff. I think I have a small project that I've been doing, which
Mm-hmm.
is I would be really curious to find out about the impact of prior physics experience on the grades of students in the first
Oh, interesting.
semester, because I think that I think there's a real issue that I've noticed in the first physics class, which is that people come in. Some people, it's a huge bimodal distribution in the beginning. Some people come in with quite a bit of high school experience, and then some people have nothing at all. And
Mm-hmm.
that first midterm can be really rough on people. And there's kind of one whole chunk who are almost getting 100%, and one whole chunk who are almost failing. And I feel like that distribution really evens out by the end of the first physics class, where people, like, it's just, I feel like it only really impacts the first midterm, and then
Interesting.
it evens out, and then by the second physics class it shouldn't impact at all.
Okay.
And I think it can depend how you teach it a little bit, but
Sure.
I really try and start from absolute zero
Uh huh.
in the beginning. And so I think that that really is an equity issue, because having prior physics experience certainly can fall along gender lines, and it can fall along race lines too. And so if you're teaching in such a way that you kind of totally advantage students who have, um, if people already have physics experience, then you're obviously not setting things up correctly. If you
Totally.
don't list it as a prereq, then it shouldn't be
It shouldn't be a
impacting.
prereq. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. That's really interesting. And I love how that's all that data exists and you can just go find it to do the study. And if it is just impacting that first midterm, maybe that's okay because it's not impacting their long term success in the physics classes.
Yeah, and I kind of noticed that I tell them that that's the case, and I often tell them, I've had students who failed the first midterm and then have aced the second midterm and then have gone on to get an A in the final. And I kind of describe that journey so that people know that that's possible. But I I kind of wanted to get some data and see if it's actually true. And
Totally.
so the thing that I'm working on, I'll get to, is about that. But and the other thing I've been working on is trying to tackle some issues around belonging uncertainty. And that to me feels a little more confusing, because I've been doing these events in the department. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I've talked about it on here before, like Crafter Noon, which is trying to sort of, I mean, it's mostly about just chatting and learning how to knit and sewing and stuff, but also just having a different framework for what constitutes STEM, and talking about math and physics. Like, making a dress is a technology, and you use a lot of math for it. So we have that, and then we also have the Paranormal Physics Society,
So
which,
cool.
yeah, was like, but it's great, and it's like students like really like it, and we talk about like experiment design and how would you figure out if a person was psychic,
How
and
cool.
it's super fun. And we've done some cultural exchange events about books and movies,
Uh
and
huh.
so I would love to, like that feels like one of those kind of case study things. But I
Yeah.
don't like, we did a little survey about a few things, but we're trying to work on doing a climate survey for the department and trying to like poke at some of these things and see
Yeah.
what is having an impact.
So you've got these cool things that you're doing and you're trying to figure out how to get some data about their impact. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, yeah.
That's
And
way cool.
do they kind of do anything?
That's
And so
awesome.
what about you?
What's working for me is doing small projects. And I guess that was one thing I wanted to emphasize is scholarship of teaching and learning, of course, goes up to you submitting an NSF proposal like you did on a big
Mm,
old project in the scholarship of teaching and learning, but it can be a simple, small change in one class and then seeing what happens. So, two teaching workshops that I've been to involved having a small change in your class and then assessing it. And that aspect of needing to assess it was really interesting to me because, of course, naturally, I'm always saying, oh, this didn't really work. Let me try this other thing. And then,
oh,
yeah.
totally.
And normally I think it's at least for me, it's very common to kind of just intuitively say, oh, I think that helped, or I don't think that helped, or that kind of thing. And that I think is valid. But to think about how to actually test beyond my intuition what the results were was pretty interesting. So anyway,
And I
I
think
guess,
that's such a crucial element that I completely left out in anything I said, but it's so true, right? It's that assessment and, just measuring it and keeping track of it
yeah,
can be so important. And just to what you said at the beginning about it being small projects, I think that's the only way to do it, right? Because if you change 9,000 things,
right.
how are you going to know what actually impacted or not? And also, it's
Yes.
not sustainable. But
Yeah, exactly. Are
yeah,
you going to be able to keep it up throughout the semester? I'm sure I wouldn't. Yeah, so doing small project, I guess, is the thing that's working. And so thinking about what the goal is for the change I want to make, or thinking about a change I want to make based on a goal, and then thinking about how to assess. And so yeah, I guess what's working for me is that it had seemed overwhelming to me to do a experiment and a study on my class because wouldn't it need to be a huge overhaul or something like that? And
yeah.
the realization that it could be a tiny change. Like I'm just going to try this one. Like I made these little flashcard things for this one topic of my class, and we just used them a few times throughout the semester to practice the material. And my goal was to do repetition so that, multiple times a week we would just pull them out and spend a little bit of time repeating that material. And so that was, I had to make the cards. I didn't even have to make the cards. I had to design the cards, and my nice undergraduate student made them. And
Oh,
then,
nice.
yeah, so it was very small in terms of, it was nowhere near overhauling the class, but then it was something that I could try and see if it was helpful. So anyway, it's really been helpful for me to realize that they can be small
Oh,
things.
cool.
Yeah.
And did it help?
Well, that's kind of what I'm working on, I guess.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to yeah. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, I think I was gonna add to that because like my first experience of doing any project like that was through a Scala, and I
Uh-huh.
think, but that sort of making a small change and seeing, but that's also kind of what I'm working on. But
Okay, so yeah, what are you
yes,
working on?
I think some of the things I'm working on are we have a tiny N because our
Yes.
classes are so small. And I read these papers and they're so cool, but they're like, yes, we had 5 sections of 200 students across all these. And you're like, oh my God, like last semester I had 14 students
Yeah.
in my intro class. And so I did my survey and everything, but I don't know what you can kind of
Yeah.
get from, like, is it just you just do it for 10 years then? Or, how does
Right.
that kind of work? So
And that's
I
maybe where
think
the
that,
intuition becomes you have to use your intuition about whether to keep going for 10 years because you're not going to have really statistically significant data with 14 people.
oh, absolutely. And I think, one thing, I wish I could do a class in this. Like I did this like little class in it,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of became quickly clear to me like a lot of people there had much more experience of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, oh man, we're not going to be starting from the ABCs, which is totally what I need. But I think I have a hard time. I wish I understood more about some of these different types of studies.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know? Because I get very bogged down in but what about the other variables? Like, what if I have this class and I do all these other things, and then, but like, what if that person just like started drinking a different type of tea, and that's what changed their, like, whatever it is,
Yeah.
or like, I don't know, but that makes me very anxious, and I feel like because in physics, and especially like the stuff I've been mostly doing is computational physics, where I am the person who controls everything, and so
All
I'm
the
like, I'm only
variables.
changing the temperature, and
Yeah.
that's all I'm doing, and so I'm terrible at statistics and understanding. Do you know what I mean? Like, how can you say this is like, so one thing I did for this project was I introduced using whiteboards in the class. So they all had little whiteboards. It was super effective. I say that again just based on my feelings
Sure,
about
sure.
it, but it was really great. And then I tried to have this survey to sort of see how they felt about contributing in class at the beginning of the semester and the end of the semester.
Uh-huh.
And it went up. And it's like, yeah, but is that just because obviously 16 weeks later they knew everybody in the class and nobody wants to say anything on the first day? And
Right.
so I had a really hard time feeling good about saying anything about that data. And I don't know. I feel like the only way to do it is to build a time machine and go back and not do the whiteboards and then do the exact same survey and see if there's a difference. Because it just feels, yeah. Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly. That's what I'm working on too. So I don't know what solutions I can offer you.
Just like companionship is just
Yeah,
fine. Just
companionship is where we'll
like, yeah,
start.
yeah,
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, so I have working on assessment, lots of variables, and then especially as an early career professor, did I just improve or get more comfortable, or did
yeah,
the approach that I tried actually help? But one thing I wanted to mention that I thought was really outside the box thinking about assessment was this great idea by our colleague Ellery Ames. And I was talking with him about this project with the flashcards that I was just describing. And so
yeah,
I was saying, how the heck am I going to assess this? I don't want to compare it, like test scores on this topic this year versus last year feels weird because it's a different group of people and I might have taught it differently. So I didn't want to do that. So I wasn't really sure how to assess it. And he said, what if you if you design your test to test it? Like the cards that I made were about statistics questions. And of course I taught other things that was not statistics.
maybe I should get your flashcards. But yes, go ahead.
It's very basic statistics, but I'd be glad to share them with you.
Pretty basic about them.
So the statistics cards was one area of topics that we covered, and then there was other areas that I hadn't made cards for. And so I designed questions where it was like 8 were statistics and 8 were not statistics. And of course, this isn't perfect, but I tried my hardest to make them both equally hard and equally variable and stuff. And so then with 8 statistics, 8 not statistics, I just wanted to see, did they do better on the statistics?
Yeah.
And if anything, I felt like the statistics was the harder content. So if they did better, it seemed like it would be due to the flashcards. And it was slightly better, but not statistically significantly slightly better. So don't know. But I thought that was a really creative approach to solving the question of how do you assess this?
Yeah.
To think about, well, what actually do you want to know? You want to know, in this case, I wanted to know, did this flashcard thing help with learning? And so let's compare it with something we didn't do. I would not have thought of it. I thought it was genius.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Do you know what this is reminding me?
What's that?
It's always just better to talk to people about it.
It is. That is
Yeah.
true. Somebody will be able to think of a good way to assess something.
Yeah, and I feel like I was in some meetings around this SoTL thing, and I was also it was run by the CTL and it was awesome. But I feel like they were just always like, oh, okay, Ruth, get with the program. Because I was like, but what about assessment? Like, how does, like, I just couldn't get off the topic. And I think they described like really, it doesn't necessarily, it's not a rigorous, like, it's not a physics experiment.
Yeah.
And just trying to get outside of that box. Or like you said, like coming up with that kind of, like that lens to look at it through is perfect. Like asking that question.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. There's more than just, I don't know, whatever I'm imagining with my time machine, which is not.
Yeah. I mean,
practical,
we aren't controlling every variable, but we can at least think about which variables we're trying to influence and try to target them as close as we can. And then you're right, it is a numbers game, and we are working with small numbers, but But then I do think that's where the intuition comes in. Do we think it made a difference? If so, let's keep trying it and see if with enough numbers we do have the data to support it, you know?
And some of the things that I read, like the articles I read that I find really exciting in, say, like the physics teacher, are not necessarily ones that are like, here's statistically beyond a
Right.
doubt proves that this was effective. It's just like, here's a cool thing I did. I really enjoyed it. The students said they liked it. Hooray. And that's like,
Totally.
woo, sharing information.
Yes.
And so that kind of thing, I guess, kind of like, I think I'm trying to write a paper at the moment about the belonging uncertainty.
Awesome.
And I think that's the kind of vibe I'm going for. Is I like doing this. It's super fun. Some students like it. Maybe you could do it.
Right.
Like that's
really helpful because it's kind of like talking with a colleague about something they tried, you
right,
know?
like
and
you and Ellery.
Yeah, and you get a great idea. You can, I like with those, here's a story of what I did kind of papers, you are just hearing one person and what they chose to do in the classroom and their reasons for doing it, which is actually really, really helpful. The statistics might only apply with the particular scenarios, you know, and is it exactly what you want to do? But this could be you read through and you get some great ideas that you decide to do yourself. So yeah, I think there's tons of value in those kind of papers too.
Totally. I think I have a wish though. I see people doing it and it's such a mysterious business to me, but you know, people who can like code interviews, and like my favorite thing about everything is people's stories. And I really like talking to people, but like seeing papers that are people get to like chat with students about stuff, but then they do a coding of the interviews, which that whole process is so mysterious to me.
What kinds of things are they coding about the interview?
They're coding things like, and also actually back to Brene Brown's research is like doing all of these interviews and then coding them into like, if people use these phrases, it sort of falls in this bin on the histogram, and if people use these phrases, and learning how to do that whole skill set, which feels like you know, people doing kind of more sociological sciences learn all those skills, and I would love to know how to learn those.
That sounds fascinating and super helpful for, especially for getting quantitative with small n's. That sounds very useful.
Totally.
Yeah,
that could be cool. And I think the other thing I'm working on is I did a workshop about using RStudio for statistics, and it was like in that moment I felt like I was understanding some things, but then it quickly fell back out.
Well,
but, like,
that's a good sign.
Do you know what a t-test is, or a p-value? All of those things are so mysterious to me.
I'll send you the note cards that I have.
Yeah, okay,
you can tell me if that's what you want to know.
I like how you're probably like, actually, I could help you. This is actually,
I know some t-tests. I know enough to know there's multiple t-tests, and I only know 2 of them.
Okay, that's a lot more than I know, because I didn't know there was multiple. So there you go.
Well, anyway.
Well,
thanks. This has been, and like you say, talking about it is a huge help. So I'm glad we talked about this.
Yeah, and I feel like, you know, so much of my hang up is, and I think though it is like just in general really good for us as professors to be doing things that are we're way brand new at.
Yes.
You know, and to remember that feeling of like, but wait, everyone else knows what this is, and I don't know what's going on.
That's a really good point.
You know, but it's super helpful to talk about. And when we said we were going to do this, I was like, but I don't have anything to say about this. But then there's always something. So yeah. So cool. Thanks, Claire. Hopefully we can come back to revisit it and see what we're doing.
Yeah, totally.
In our SoTL projects.
Once you've gotten your NSF grant too. That'll be sweet.
Oh, dude. Yeah. Well, if I do, it'll be thanks to your bazillion comments. That was super helpful.
Well, what I'm saying is you've got lots to say about SoTL. You wrote a whole NSF grant about SoTL.
Well, is that SoTL when it's about people teaching, like faculty? Anyway, okay, this is an off-air conversation.
But it seemed
Sorry.
like it was.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Claire.
Thanks, Ruth.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. We're delighted to have you as a listener, and we would love to hear from you. And if you want to email us, our address is contactprofessorpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any of your suggestions for future shows, or professor quotes that you might want to share with us, or even just things that have come up for you when you were listening to previous episodes. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, we would love if you would spread the word. So the best way to spread word is by telling people you know if you think they should listen to it, or you can leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.